Welcome to the podcast. In this episode, I interview Casey Cox. Casey is from Australia, but she lives in Cambodia, and she serves as the conservation advisor and operations manager of a brand new project called Fauna Conservation NFT. This is a really fun episode where we talk all things Fauna NFT and how NFTs are actually being used to help endangered species, but not only to help fundraise for conservation that's happening around endangered species, but there's utility behind the NFTs. And we talk about what value and benefits there are of nonprofits entering this Web3 space. And here we go. It is 7:45 in the morning here, and you are the exact opposite, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's 7:45 in the evening.
Wow. So you've already done you had a full day and getting ready to wind down and sleep. It's so you're based in
Cambodia. So I'm in Phnom Penh.
okay. And where are you originally from?
I'm from Australia. So from the south, I spent like half my life in Melbourne, which I really loved, and but I grew up in country Victoria, so about an hour and a half east of Melbourne.
Okay, that's cool. I'm curious to learn more about you and your background and how you got into what you're doing, and then we can transition into this really neat NFT project.
Yeah, cool. So I've been in Cambodia now it'll be 6 years in February. So still, it's home. It's definitely home, but it's become like a second home. So I still refer to Australia as home, but definitely Cambodia is home now as well. So, and I can see myself staying here for the foreseeable future for sure. So my background is all in conservation, and that was why I moved to Cambodia. So I grew up in country Victoria, as I was saying, about an hour and a half east out of Melbourne, and I actually grew up on a dairy farm. So from a very young age, I've always had a love of animals, and I just knew I was always going to work with animals in some way, shape, or form. And I guess, growing up in Australia, Australia has really unique and really amazing wildlife. But because it was, the everyday kind of thing that I was exposed to, I was always more interested in exotic species. So, those animals that we could only find in the zoo in Australia.
For
So,
us, what you had growing up is very exotic, and my
yeah.
wife is terrified. She wants to go to Australia, but is terrified that something's going to kill her. That's just I don't know if that's reality, but
I mean, lots of people out from outside of Australia definitely have that view and that concern for their safety. And it is really, I guess, portrayed like that a lot when you actually live outside of it. But living inside of it, I guess I definitely don't feel that way. And that's funny because, I grew up on a farm, like I was saying, and, there were snakes, like, snakes were a part of my childhood growing up. And of course, they're venomous snakes. They're really poisonous. As a small child, like my primary school was very small. It was like a country primary school, and we used to do this thing called show and tell. I can't even remember how often we do it, but we get to take something into the classroom and show and tell our classmates about it. And I recall like capturing a venomous spider called a redback and actually taking that into the classroom with me in a jar. And actually, it happened to be a female, and she ended up giving birth to hundreds of these venomous spiders that, of course, I then
terrifying.
took home and released. But that was just a part of my childhood. Like, it's not big and it's not scary. And
Right.
I mean, snakes, I guess, are the most common, I guess, thing that people fear, and it's just so very rare to see a snake in the wild.
Yeah.
Like, they're so afraid of humans, and can hear and feel us coming a mile away, and we never hardly see them. So
Right.
yeah,
That's fair.
definitely. it has a reputation, but I think your wife and your family you'll all be very safe if you were to visit.
Perfect. I'll make sure to reassure her.
Yes.
So you're in Cambodia now, and what's the lay of the land look like in Cambodia in regards to conservation and species and I guess your draw to Cambodia especially.
Yeah. So before moving here, I didn't really know a lot about Cambodia or even really Southeast Asia. But I was always really keen to visit the area because coming from Australia, like anywhere overseas, is quite a far distance. So Southeast Asia is really considered quite close for us. And so I didn't really realize until I kind of got here that they had all of those kind of exotic animals that I was used to seeing in a zoo. You know, they've got elephants, they've got tigers, they've got rhinos, they've got so many different species of primates. And so there is, and I knew coming here that there was a lot of conservation work being done. So in Cambodia, and I think in actually most countries, a lot of the conservation work really falls to not-for-profits. Governments generally, have other priorities. The environment is normally pretty low on the agenda list. And so I knew there was a lot of not-for-profits working in the region, and they were working on, really anything in conservation. So right from like on the ground protection of animals or forests, through to education, through to alternative livelihoods. So, looking at communities that are reliant on these
Mm,
resources that are, they want to protect, and therefore having to find those communities alternative sources of income and livelihood so that they can survive. So, yeah, I knew there was a lot of conservation work being done here. I kind of had a bit of a look on the internet before I left about what organizations were here and the kinds of different roles that they had and different projects that they had running. And then when I moved over here, it took about 6 months until I kind of got my foot in the door with an
mm,
organization, in just like an entry level role as like a tour guide. So uh, using kind of tourism, which at this time, this was pre-COVID, was booming in this
mm,
region, as a source of income for the project, for the
mm.
organization. Because again, not for profit, as the name says, they don't make any profits. They're always,
Right.
looking for funding. So this was one way they were bringing in funding for their projects here in Cambodia.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah,
That's neat. Well, that's quite ambitious of you to just to move to Cambodia and then look around and see who's doing work and try to get a job and yeah, and now you've been there for you said 6 years.
yeah, it would be 6 years in February, and it's just it goes so quick. And like you said, with like Florida and COVID and stuff, obviously that's
Yeah.
been a couple of years. But I was lucky to be here pre-COVID, which was nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, time just passes so quickly. It's like you blink and it's gone. And I think you definitely find that a lot with the expat community in
Mm,
Cambodia. It's like everybody came here, as I did, with the intention for just staying for 12 months. I'll just stay for 12 months, I'll get some experience, I'll see what it's like. And then all of a sudden, 6 or 7 years later, you're still here. So,
right. But you enjoy it.
yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
It's just such a, it's a totally different way of life to
Mm,
things in Australia for sure. Different cultures, obviously, different religions, different systems in economics, in politics, in even in conservation. The way that the same organizations, like there are many organizations that operate here in Cambodia that are international NGOs. So, they exist and have programs in Australia and all around the world. And just to see how, those same organizations operate very differently in different regions,
hmm,
under obviously different, governmental regimes and things like that. So, yeah,
hmm.
it's really interesting.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Um, yeah. So why don't you tell us what you are working on now? So um, what's the fauna conservation NFT project? What is fauna? I guess is my first question.
So fauna actually refers to animals. So generally, flora refers to, our trees and those kind of species, and fauna refers to the animal kind of kingdom side of the world. And fauna conservation NFT. So this is a very new space for me. But the project was founded by three British expats who all met here in Cambodia, and they all have very different backgrounds in terms of like in tech or in development, things like that. Nothing really related to conservation, but they all had a very strong passion about conservation and loved spending time in nature. And actually, that's on different trips into nature to visit ecotourism sites or to go and find like endangered species in Cambodia. They kind of bonded and came up with this idea of fauna conservation NFT. So the idea behind the project is to kind of bring the concept of not-for-profits in terms of like the funding component, to kind of bring that into the new technological age by using NFTs basically to raise money, raise donations for conservation projects. So fauna itself, or fauna NFT as we call it for short, we don't necessarily run any of those conservation projects ourselves, but what we want to do is help partners who are in the conservation arena to raise funds for them. So perhaps they might not have the technological background, perhaps they might not yet have entered into the world of web3, they might be smaller organizations that just don't have huge tech departments or innovation departments that can help them kind of navigate this space. So that's kind of where Fauna comes in to help the partners. And at the end of the day, the idea is to create these really great NFT artworks. In our case, so far, it will probably majority always be like an artwork, a digital artwork. And the sale of those will raise donations for our partner organisations. And at the moment, we've been partnered with an organisation called Reef Check Indonesia. Reef Check is actually global, but this is their Indonesian branch that we've been partnered with specifically, and they, as the name suggests, are working with reef and marine conservation, and we're going to help raise some money for them.
That's really cool. Yeah, the artwork's amazing. It's like really detailed and I just love how it's like it's kind of a scene that is like building throughout the whole 20 or 30 seconds. Do what was the process like of actually building those? Did you hire some kind of like animator, motion designer, or what was that like?
Yeah, so we had to find a graphic artist and or a graphic designer. I'm not really sure what term they prefer to go by, but that was actually a bit of a process because we wanted 3D animated, realistic looking NFTs. And again, I don't really know much about the artsy side of things, but to get that kind of artwork, you need quite specific software, and not a lot of people have, so it's obviously a huge investment. So it took a little while, but we did find an artist here in Cambodia actually, and he's been really great. So it like pre that stage was a lot of work, like just getting a partner on board and then design, like going through the process of, okay, well, which species are we going to do this for? What is the artwork going to look like, and that kind of thing. And me coming from the conservation side of thing, I was very much like, I want it to look realistic. Like, I want this to be, people will look at it and know immediately what species they're looking at. Whereas, some of my, like the bosses, for example, they have the more tech background and they're more into NFTs and crypto and things like that. So they're like, we want it to look like this and it can have these components and things like that. So I think in the end, with the help of the artists, like you said, we've created something that's really great. Like to me, they look really good. Like if
So
it was a
this is
piece
how
of
they
art, I'd be
actually
happy to put it.
that's how they actually. So I'm looking at this really freaky looking shrimp called the mantis shrimp.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
which is, I mean, what's really neat with them being realistic. A lot of NFTs are not obviously realistic. They're very cartoony,
yeah,
hyperbole, goofy, which
yeah,
is like a whole style in itself. But I think
yeah.
the neat thing here is like we're talking about endangered species that are just, and by the definition of being endangered, they're hard to find. And so
Mhm.
like what do they even look like realistically? And so I think it's neat that we have this, this realistic depiction of them. But is this how this thing actually looks?
You should definitely Google them. It's a peacock mantis shrimp, and they are amazing. Like the underwater
Wow.
worlds that exist. Like I'm not a diver. I've never gotten into diving, but I just like it's just a whole other world. And the peacock mantis shrimp, I think, is just amazing. Like the colors that
Wow.
that those species have are amazing. And the particular one, the peacock one that we chose, is it's kind of a little bit like internet famous because it has this punching action that it uses its front appendages to catch its prey with.
Mm.
And it's something ridiculous at how fast it actually uses those appendages to punch its prey. It's something like I forget. It's faster than the blink of an eye.
Wow.
But yeah, they kind of came to internet fame through this punching action kind of thing. But yeah, the coloring on it is great, and yeah, the artist has done a really great job in uh, depicting this shrimp in what it looks like, even like the number of appendages it has, like the number of swimming legs it has, and things
Hmm.
like that. Yeah, really, like I'm really, really impressed with that. I think it's great. I really hope everyone else will think too.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. So I might have to pick that one up. So the one I picked up as soon as you guys launched was the raccoon butterfly.
Yeah,
Um, because my favorite thing about that scene is like you have the other fish that come in the background, and then he's got like a swimming mate. Um, yeah. So I see it's so it's I just want to understand the, I guess, uh, potential future roadmap. So Fauna NFT is the creator of this collection on OpenSea. For those interested, is called Non Fungible Reef. But I'm assuming there will be other non fungible collections in the future that are not. So reef obviously is like marine animals, and maybe there will even be additions to this collection.
yeah. So that's really where we're hoping that this will go. Obviously, we've launched this collection under not ideal market conditions for NFTs, and that's why we've really just started with a pilot. So at this point, we've just released the 3 species, but in the full collection that we're hoping will come out early, maybe in 2023. There will be another 12 species. So in total, there'll be this collection will be 15. And so that's kind of the beginning, I guess. From there, depending on the success of that collection and depending on how things are going with our partner, for sure we would like to explore the opportunity to do more collections with them because, like you said, there's really room to kind of grow here. This is a very realistic looking kind of animated 3D artwork, but like you said, a lot of NFTs, they are kind of cartoony or gimmicky. And so there's, avenues there for sure to go down that road, perhaps with, one particular species or something like that. So there's room to kind of grow a lot in this space. And then beyond that, I guess we need hopefully this collection will draw interest from others who want to then get on board with this, and we can perhaps grow our partnership and then move into whatever our partners are really what their focus is. So maybe that could be forest animals in Southeast Asia, or maybe that might end up being a savanna collection from Africa. It's really going to depend where we find our partners and what their projects are and what species they work with. So maybe it is animals, maybe it's flora, so maybe it's some sort of trees and things like that. So it's really going to depend on who we end up partnering with. But for sure, this is just the pilot, these first three. And early next year, we hope to release the remaining 12 that will go with this first full collection.
Very cool. I see that each of these has unlockable content. I haven't actually seen what that is yet. I haven't verified mine. Do you know what that is?
I assume that is referring to like those additional things that are available, like if you purchase the NFT. So, for example, one of those items that we had spoken about, and this, I guess, depends on who purchases the NFT if they want to provide this information, but that would be like something like signing them up for the Reef Check International newsletter. So that was like an additional freebie that we had spoken about. Also, previews and pre-sales for the remaining collection. So when it's released, hopefully
like
in
a
early
whitelist.
2020. Yeah, sorry, again, I'm not really good with the
Yeah.
terminology, but giving anybody who's already purchased an NFT, the ability to pre-sale for the remaining collection that will hopefully be launched early next year. And we're also still, like, the partner that we're working with, Reef Check, they are still actually kind of helping us to come up with more ideas as it goes along. So the other really important part of this, which again we'll post, some of this information will be publicly shared, of course, but some of it will probably provide a greater level of detail to those NFT holders, and that's really around the transparency of where their funds are being used. So that's really important for any not-for-profit or social enterprise. Donors always really want to know where their money is going, what it's being spent on. And so there will be impact reporting. So anyone that's purchased an NFT will get a bit more detail about where that's going, and then publicly will also share some information as well.
That's neat. Yeah, and I think, I haven't seen any nonprofit leverage this yet, and this is something I'm exploring at Compassion International, where I serve. But the blockchain allows us to put information, anything on the blockchain is publicly accessible and unchangeable. So there's no reason why we couldn't share impact data on chain, or even like become more transparent and have, for example, if a gift was made to buy an NFT and the promise is, hey, the proceeds of this NFT will, go to fund Reef Check Indonesia, to actually see that all happen, on chain. I think, there's some interesting use cases or possibilities there, and I think, hearing that you guys are already thinking about that as to how to show the holders, the impact that their donations having is really neat.
Yeah, I think, like, coming from the conservation kind of not-for-profit scene, I just think that that's a given. Like, donors are, they're entitled to that information, and they often, some people for sure, they just want to give their donation and then that's it. Like, they're happy to never hear from you again or have nothing further to do with you, and that's absolutely fine. But certainly a lot of people will want to know how it's being spent, what's it going to, because at the end of the day, I guess that kind of contributes to that feeling that we get when, we're doing something for good, when we're giving money for good, that just, I guess, continues that feeling. And I think it also for sure helps build repeat donors. So,
Yeah.
people are going to be more inclined to come back and donate to your project again if they've been told where exactly their money's gone and what it's been spent on. And they can see, that the organisation's open and transparent with them. And yeah, that means they're generally more willing to then give to the same projects multiple times.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's that trust that continues to build. And
Yeah.
I think especially the next generation, so like, Gen Z and whatever the next one after that is called. I don't even know what it do you have to no, okay.
No,
But Gen Z
definitely.
especially, I think they want to see that their donation, their giving is having impact. It's not just enough to, like older generations to just, all right, I trust, this organization. I'm gonna kind of give the money and wait for the annual report. If there's a
Yeah.
way to see like impact in real time, like that, I think is what is right up Gen Z's alley, and just the next generation when we think of how they're going to give and what they will expect, to receive in their giving.
Yeah. And I think, again, like being new to this kind of crypto and NFT space, like it's really brought home how much of a community it is. Like it's
Yeah.
very big on a community feel. Like, if you buy this NFT, you become a part of this community. And I think a part of building on that is definitely, like you said, the trust, it's the transparency. Like if we want to build that community, then we definitely have to be open and transparent with them and tell them, this is where your funds have gone, and this is what's going to happen with X, Y, and Z and things like that. So yeah, I think it just all forms part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the community note, it seems like a lot of Web3 NFT projects kind of congregate on Twitter and Discord, and I see that you guys have all of that. All the links are right up there on the OpenSea. Um, it's kind of fitting that you have this. The first collection is on the OpenSea. It's it ties in well.
It does.
Um, yeah. Well, so currently there's three NFTs. There's raccoon, butterfly fish, giant manta ray, and the mantis shrimp. What did you said there was a different name as well, or there's an additional for the mantis shrimp?
So this particular species we've gone with is the peacock mantis shrimp.
Okay,
So there,
okay,
yeah, there are many mantis shrimps, but this is one particular species that we've gone with.
that's cool. Um, I have a quick story about peacocks I want to share with you. So there's a neighborhood that we went to visit some friends the other day, and we went to this neighborhood in Orlando, Central Florida. Central Florida has weird animals too. Like we're from Canada, where there's not
Yeah,
anything. Like it's just
yeah,
cold.
yeah,
We have like there's gators if you walk across the street in the water. So like we had to get used to that. And
yeah.
there's there's dangerous spiders and snakes and stuff. But um, we went into this neighborhood in the middle of this Orlando, like which is a city. Um, we went to this neighborhood, and I'm not kidding. There were at least 100 peacocks as soon as we entered this neighborhood, just scattered everywhere, all over the yard, all over the street, on top of everyone's roofs, up in the trees. And we asked the people that lived in this community, and he said that they've been there for as long as that they've lived there, and they had lived there for 20 years. But there used to be this orange grove that existed, and the peacocks they lived in this orange grove, and then as cities expand, it became a neighborhood, but the peacocks didn't leave. And so it was just like it was comical and wild to enter this neighborhood and just to have peacocks flooded. I've never seen so many peacocks
Everywhere.
everywhere, and they're wild peacocks, and they're just you know peacocks are kind of terrifying. But anyways,
Same kind of thing in Australia. Like growing up in Australia, you would always just find peacocks in random locations, and they would just be, I wouldn't say wild, but they would be roaming freely for sure.
right.
And they would just be, you would find them in random like small town gardens, or they would be in like on someone's property. and they weren't like a pest. Well, I mean, they are technically, because they're an exotic species in Australia, they shouldn't be kind of probably roaming around like that because they're not native.
Mm.
But they kind of get that pest kind of image in Australia. But then moving here to Cambodia, one of their like amazing, Cambodia's got really amazing bird life, and one of their amazing birds is actually this green peafowl, and it's critically endangered.
Mm.
And it's just a beautiful bird, and it is really so interesting to go from a country where like it's a peacock, it's a pest, to here it's, oh my god, it's a peacock, and it's like an amazing peacock, and it's critically endangered, and we have to protect this peacock.
Yeah,
Whereas in
yeah.
Australia, it's so totally different.
Wow. Yeah, that's fascinating. Um, yeah, it's so interesting just thinking of how animals are viewed in different parts of the world. Um, I mean, because they can go from anywhere from like household animals to household food. It's like it depends
Yeah.
on where you are. It's
That's
very
right.
interesting. Um,
Yeah.
so currently the proceeds from these go to these NFT sales go to the Reef Check Indonesia.
Yeah.
Is there do you have any future plans for token holders?
With the founders that are involved, because they have that more kind of NFT background, they're very big on developing that further. So it's definitely something that's still in the works at this point, I would say, and something that we will, I guess, notify the token holders of on our social media channels once we've kind of finalized all of those details. But yes, at the bare minimum at the start, it's definitely around the impact reporting, definitely around the pre-sale or the future collection on the whitelist, and the opportunity to be signed up to the global Reef Check newsletter. Again, that's going to depend on what people are really interested in. If
Right.
people are interested in marine conservation, which hopefully they are, and that's why they've purchased one of these NFTs, then hopefully that means they will be interested in a Reef Checks newsletter that covers marine ecosystems around the entire world. So
Yeah. Well, and I think you are right. I think there is this segment of, what Web3 promises is this decentralization and kind of, anonymous, uh, purchasing and selling and so on. I think there may be an opportunity for people that aren't interested in signing up and giving an email, to have there's there's a way to have like a token gated, so you could verify that you hold an NFT, and then you get access to a special website, and that website could essentially be the newsletter publication as it gets put out. So that may be something to consider.
thank you. That is a good idea. Actually, and it does sound kind of familiar. So possibly something that one of the founders has spoken about, actually.
Cool.
They definitely have much more knowledge than me in that kind of arena.
What what is the value of nonprofits entering this space? And I guess to kind of flip that question on its head, how were you convinced of the space? Being relatively new, what did that pitch look like, and then what made you see the value of it?
Um, that's a tough question. For me, because my background is conservation, the draw to the role was conservation, but it was about something that's totally new in the conservation kind of arena. Like there are definitely large not-for-profits, like global not-for-profits, that are moving into this space, and they've started moving into this space in kind of in the last 2 years, I'd say kind of 2020-ish. And so the draw for me was really to see where this can go, like how this can
Mm.
grow, how is this going to help conservation? And I definitely see the value in it, because I know that in conservation, funding is a constant struggle.
Mm.
Like all of the organizations that operate here in Cambodia and globally, any not-for-profit that's operating, funding is always a constant struggle. You'll have full-time staffing resources, that their roles are just to try and find funding. And that's in the form of, applying for grants from large foundations or from zoos or from educational institutions or whatever it may be, to trying to come up with new ways to bring in funding. And I think that's where this really holds value for not-for-profits. This is a new way to bring in funding. And I think what is even like a greater appeal is that it's a totally different generation. Like, from my understanding, this crypto space is, it's the younger generations that are predominantly interested and active, whereas in the not-for-profit world, traditionally most of our funding comes from the older generation. People that, perhaps look at crypto and think it's a scam, or, they don't necessarily have the technical knowledge to set up a crypto wallet and transfer funds into it and things like that. So I think that, there's a lot of money in crypto. I think that there is a really diverse background of people also in the space. So it's not, a very niche market. There's all kinds of different people that are interested in this, that have now got money and now are looking for ways to use that money. And yes, of course, there's lots of ways you can use crypto now, and it's becoming more mainstream, and it's only going to become more mainstream as time goes on. But for now, not-for-profits entering this space now is happening at like the very early stages, and giving people an opportunity to give back, which I think, the younger generations, they want to do that. From especially what I see here in Cambodia, it's the younger generations that are really stepping up for the environment, particularly because obviously that's where I'm looking and most active. But they're really stepping up for conservation. They're really stepping up for the environment. They're really interested in climate change and all of this kind of stuff. And so if you've got those people, those younger generations who have that passion and have that interest, and you've now given them a space where they can proactively engage in that by donating to causes that they're passionate about, I think that's just like it's just a really amazing opportunity. And traditionally, like, obviously not the case for every organization or for everybody, but traditionally not-for-profits are slow to innovate. And there are many reasons for that. And I mean, certainly, generally, it's lack of funds, it's lack of resources. What funding they do get has to go to those projects that are most important. And obviously, innovation is not always high on that list. And so I think that anybody entering this space now is just like, it's still newish. There's still room to grow. Things are still going to change. It's still kind of like in the teething stages a little bit. But jumping on board now, I think, like, wow, like an organization that gets into this space at this early on, I think is really just one that's kind of at the forefront, that's like forward thinking. They're not just thinking about, okay, how can I get money today? But they're actually thinking about, where's this going to go in the next 10 years? And I think that, entering this space now is just a really good step for any not-for-profit, really, because I think not only will it open doors now, but definitely further down in the future, it's going to, I think, open a lot of doors for them. So, I think that, for me, like, because again, like my background in conservation, like, I want there to be, constant streams of money into conservation, because I want to fund those projects that I care about. And so if I can work for an organization that is helping those organizations to get the funding that they need to do the vital work that they do, and we can do this for them, for those smaller, perhaps, organizations that don't have the resources or don't have the funds or don't have the tech knowledge, like even me, like, I certainly don't have the tech knowledge. I only started in February, and wow, have I learned so much in the last kind of 10 months. So yeah, I just think that was really appealing. Like, okay, I know nothing about this, but it's supporting something that I love. And if
Mm,
it's supporting something that I love, then it's something I want to learn about. So
yeah, that's really
that's what drew me in.
that's really neat to hear, and I think you're exactly right. It is the next crypto tends to skew younger, and what better way to activate like a global audience? And that's the other beauty of crypto is like people can find other like-minded people from anywhere in the world, and they can, there's that community around that set of goals. And in this case, it's helping to save endangered marine species right now, and they can all participate together. But then they can also find those like-minded people, and continue to think through like how best to do this. And I just that's one of the beauties of Web3 and NFTs is the community that can form around that. And it is interesting when we think like NFTs started to go mainstream right when COVID happened. And I don't think that's a coincidence because everyone was like shut inside and everyone was looking for community. And then you had all these NFT projects kind of boom. But the it is just the beginning, like you said, and I think those organizations that start to think through this now and start to plan for the future, not just like a short-term win, but like what would it look like for 2, 5, 10 years down the road to build this community, to foster this community, to provide value to this community, but then to give them an opportunity to actually not just watch the mission from afar of whatever is trying to be accomplished, but to be active participants in the mission. And I think that's what NFTs promise. So that's really neat to hear. And I'll have all the links to OpenSea and Discord and Instagram and Twitter. I'll include in the show notes.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that you have that you'd like to share? Or I also have to ask, do you have a favorite endangered species? Because I feel like that's like a question that you just have to ask someone who's into conservation.
That's really hard, actually.
You can give me two or three.
um, I've always been a cat person, so any kind of large cat, like growing up, it was always a tiger for sure. And tigers were also like one of my brother's favorite animals. And so growing up, for sure, it was always a tiger. But coming to Cambodia now and working here, it's just like exposed me to a whole different level of wildlife. Because, for example, Cambodia has 8 native wild cats. Like
Wow.
who knew that Cambodia had 8 native wild cats? And they're all just so beautiful. So it's probably still a cat. It could be the clouded leopard, or it could even actually be the marble cat. The marble cats here are just stunning, just
Marble
beautiful,
cat.
beautiful creatures. Yeah. The markings on them are beautiful, and their tail, they have these beautiful long tails that are thick and like bushy.
That's really neat.
Yes, but yeah, it's really hard. And actually, one more thing I will say, because my bosses will probably kill me if I don't include it, is that it is really important to include in the fauna story that we have gotten to this point because they won a competition. So they won a competition ran by the Asian Development Bank, so the ADB. It was a competition called NFTs for Development. And in October 2021, the fauna guys won this competition over I think it was 99 other contestants, and through that secured some seed funding, and that also connected us through Impact Hub Manila to our partners, Reef Check Indonesia, who have also been supported through by the Indonesian Climate Change Trust Fund. So it's definitely really important to include that as part of the fauna story, because at the end of the day, we wouldn't be here without them. So we wouldn't be here, and we are really grateful for all of their support, the ADB, the Impact Hub, the ICCTF, and Reef Check.
Awesome. Well, everyone should check out your project, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys do next.
Thanks so much for having me over. It's been really great. Thank you.
Thank you.